Welcome back. Um, Doing a little bit different today. I usually don't sit really or face the camera because I don't really have a good way to do it. I don't have the setups everybody does where I really have a bench or something, to lay out things in front of me. I really just have my one little reloading room, tool room here. So I wanted to talk a little bit because I get the question often, and this is more geared towards people starting out. There's tons of videos and tons of information out there. And I also want to say, as a full disclaimer, I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional. I have been shooting for over 35 years. I started out, my dad gave me a little Marlin lever action 22 rifle when I was probably, I think, about 7 years old, somewhere around there, between 6 and 8. Uh, Started out shooting early and or at a very young age, and I've been doing so ever since. But as far as, I've never been into hunting until last year, so I'm new to that, and I'm newer to reloading. So I started reloading about 2.5 years ago. But I've learned a lot of things. I talked to a large community of people, and I put together a lot of information. And I'm hoping, maybe some of the things, somebody might find some value in some of the things I've discovered, or even just my opinions, because the majority of all this stuff is different opinion. Now, there's solid data to back a lot of different things, but there's not one set process for everything. It's just kind of like in manufacturing and stuff like that. There's industry standards that you follow a lot of that stuff as guidelines for a reason, because it's proven, and other people have found good success with it. But then you can branch off and do your own thing, and sometimes find more success or sometimes fail. It's one of those type situations. But I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, reloading and how to start load developing. I always tell people, I have some people that have approached me at the range, or even when I've been in a store and I'm over at the reloading section, and I love the community of shooters and people that reload. A lot of people, just randomly in the store, you're standing in the aisle and somebody just asks, do you reload? How long have you been doing it? What are your methods? What are your thoughts? And it opens up a big discussion about it. And sometimes I stand there and I might talk with somebody for an hour or so about it, because I enjoy doing that. So I get a lot of information that way, and I try to share the information that I have. But in those conversations, I've had people before ask me, what do you need to get started reloading? I would first say start off with getting a reloading manual. Like, I have some behind me. I have a couple other ones. I had the last edition of the Hornady manual. I have a Sierra manual somewhere, and the Hodgdon manuals. I have those, a couple different years of those. But start off with a manual. Really good information in there. You can, the last edition Hornady, when I picked that up a couple years back, I read through just the whole front of the book, just learning kind of some history there and best practices and things like that. So a lot of good information there, good place to start. So when you get into reloading, the equipment's a whole different story, and we can I'll do a different thing on that. I have, even in my 2.5 years, I've accumulated a lot of different equipment. And the videos that you see me do where I'm reloading is not touching all the different equipment I have. It's just kind of what I have laid out is what I've kind of developed as my preferences in it, and what the equipment that I use the most. But that's not, I have a lot more equipment besides what's behind me. I can't fit everything in this little room, so I have large, like, storage containers in my basement of other reloading equipment things. So I'll do another video at some point kind of covering all that. Like, I have multiple presses and all kind of things, but I've kind of just stuck with certain ones back behind me. So let's talk load development process. Start out with the manual, look in there. I think one of the most common things that most people do is you're going to start out with components. So get all your components together, look at your rifle and decide what your barrel twist is, and then go from there. Like start getting your components together, like what bullet are you going to use? And then Berger and a lot of them on the boxes will say, a minimum twist rate. Well, kind of decide. And that doesn't, that's not in stone, and that's not the only route you can go. For instance, have in some of the videos I've already started putting together, I have some of the rifles, it'll say on the box, like some of the Berger bullets, it'll say, minimum 1 1/8 twist. Well, when it's a heavier bullet, I found that particular rifle didn't like it whatsoever, and it shot it poorly. But then when I move down in weight, then that's when I get a lot better groups. So you have to, there's no like set thing saying you have to use like a certain weight. You might have to try different ones. Now you might have in mind, I really want to shoot this bullet at this weight. Well, that's great. It may or may not work out for you. So that's something you'll just have to discover, as you're doing this process. I really wanted to shoot certain Bergers with certain rifles at one point in time, and I kind of messed up, and I talked about it in a previous video. Well, and let's just say it was basically these. So these are the 153 grain 6.5 Bergers, and then on the back it says 1 1/8 twist minimum. Well, a Bergara rifle that I have, I bought 500 of these, thinking this is what I want to shoot. And then I did all kinds of load development, and I just really couldn't get groups that I was satisfied with out of that rifle with these bullets. It didn't matter the seating depth, the powder charge, everything I put together. I just couldn't get to where I wanted it to be. Well, then I dropped down and started using the 143 grain Hornadys behind me. And that's what worked in the rifle and worked for me. So, you just have to, it's something to look at. When I'm doing load development now on a rifle, I don't go and just buy 500 bullets anymore. I start out with 100, and that's usually enough to do my load development process. And then sometimes I can find what the rifle likes early on, and it doesn't take me long to get there. Sometimes it takes a little bit more load development to get there. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I think, the next thing after you get your components together and the bullet you're wanting to use, and most people will recommend, pick one and try to run with it and don't do multiple at one time. I'm guilty of doing that. Like I'll buy 3 different bullet brands at different weights, and I'll do load development with all 3 of them at one time. You can do that. I mean, it's a lot more work, and a lot more range time too. So that's, extra money, time, all the things. Just, you have to decide if that's for you or not and how you want to approach it. But then the next thing is most people that I found start out with their powder charge. So look in your manual, look at like recommended powders, and there's going to be some variations in that. Like you might go to the Hornady manual and it might list H4350 and Varget, and it might not have Superformance. And then you go to the Hodgdon website and then it has Superformance in there, or so if you go by one manual, then you may not find all the different options or powder brands types that may be actually available to use. So use like different resources and look at all that. And then there's a lot of variations on the max powder charge you can load as well. I've seen a lot of discrepancies in that. So, look at the different manuals and see what they're recommended and judge for yourself. Always be cautious about that. When I'm doing load development, what I tend to do is I pick a powder type and I look at the max charge in the manual or manuals, and then I'll start roughly around that. So I usually start at the max charge and I work backwards. Some people do a broader spectrum. They'll look at the minimum and max charge and they'll do a spectrum across that whole range. I usually don't start out doing or really loading anything around the lower charges. What I tend to do is look at the max, and for me, and I'm not saying do this, I might start out with like 0.2 grains over the max as a starting point, or not necessarily starting point, but a finishing point in that load development. And then most of the time I'll work backwards by 0.2. So I'll start at that like 0.2 over, and then I'll work back in 0.2 increments. Sometimes I would do 0.3 increments. It's whatever you want to do. Some people do 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, whatever you want to try and what works for you. I'm not saying there's like a right or wrong way to do this stuff. It's just whatever you kind of find you want to try to hit a broader spectrum, and look at your ES, SDs, your speeds and all that stuff, and then base a decision off that, and then work up your next load around something that way. I mean, it's just however you want to do it. So then I've got my powder weights, and most of the time, and this is another thing where you're going to get conflicting opinions. What size groups do you shoot? So how many of each do you load? Most people, and I say that loosely. I mean, I don't really want to say like that I know what everybody does or the majority does, but it seems that way in all the videos that I watch and the research I've done and the people I've talked to. I'm basing all this off of that, kind of scenario as a whole. A lot of people shoot 3-shot groups. Some people say that's just not enough data. You can't get enough data and information out of 3-shot groups. Some people do 5-shot groups. Some do 10. Some say you need to do 20. I've never really started off in load development doing a 20-shot or a 10-shot. For me, I've always done 5-shot groups, but as I'm starting to load development now, or load develop for some hunting rifles with lighter, thinner barrels that heat up faster, I'm now getting to a point where I'm going to start doing some 3-shot group load development. And I've seen some famous YouTubers out there before saying, is when you're doing 3-shot load development, is that going to give you enough data? Well, I mean, some people say it gives you enough to know what you're doing wrong, but not always like what you're doing, what's right or the real direction you're going to go. But it can be a starting point, right? So, I mean, that gives you something to start a basis with, or a foundation. So, it's just kind of however you want to do it. I found with some of the lighter barrel rifles, if I do 5-shot, the barrel really starts heating up, and that kind of changes my group size. So I would, what do I do? Like do round robin shooting, or do I shoot 3 and then cool it and then go back and do a couple more? You have to decide all those little things. So when I was shooting the 5-shot group, then I noticed after the first 3, then, in some of the shots, I would notice a little change there in the group size. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to do some load development and do 3-shot groups and use that, to get my, my speed and SDs and all that stuff, and make note, and then kind of go from there. And then I might work up to a 5-shot, but I might want to start, so I'm not wasting ammunition and time, I might just want to start with that 3-shot group you know, like I said, just for a basis. So you have to decide all that. Then what I do typically myself is I look at I don't really look at the group size as much. I base it on the ES, SDs, and group size all together. And I know tons of people, they want to look for the speed, and they kind of look for on a graph, you know, like when it plateaus a little bit between groups, and they'll take that and use that to work off of and develop further. I don't really do that as much with speed. I don't focus on speed as much, just my methods and opinions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the lowest SDs, ES, and then the group size, and kind of put that together. And I mainly focus initially on the SDs and ES. So whatever gives me really, whichever powder charge or load gives me the lowest numbers there in a reasonable group, you know, then that's what I'm going to take and typically move to the next step. Then the next step, I've done both ways as well. So for my next step, I'm either going to go back and I'm going to look at the powder charge that I used, or if there were two that were close, and then I might do like between those in like 0.1 increments, and you know, might change my powder charge there. Or you can move on and start doing seeding depth and testing with that. I've done both ways. Like sometimes I'll just pick one of those and then I go to seeding depth and see what happens. Sometimes I still continue to mess around with my powder charge, create some more loads there, then get the best one after, you know, that, and then move to seeding depth. Totally up to you. I mean, and there are people as well that they basically just pick a powder charge and then they move directly into seeding depth and go that way first. I've never done that one, but I mean, to each your own. It's whatever you decide to do. So I'm going to find the powder charge that I like, that I'm getting the best numbers and data off of, and then I'm going to do my seeding depth. So then I do a couple different ways with that. What I've previously done, and you'll see when I go out the range, I've got some loads. So on my next range trip, I'm going to shoot some loads that I made in one direction here, and then I'm going to do a video where I do the other direction. So one direction is I find my lands or touch point, and then I basically have come off that roughly 10 thousandths, right? So I'll come back 10 thousandths, and then I'll do loads in either 10 thousandths or 20 thousandths increments off of that. So start off 10 thousandths off the lands, and then continue to go 10 thousandths off the lands in increments. That's one method. I think what some of the loads I just did for the Seekins, I think I did initially 10 thousandths off, and then I did 20 thousandths off each load. And then, you know, you can try that and see where that gets you. Then, you know, you look at that, which load gave you the best data and results, and then you know, adjust further. And, you know, it's a continuation or a process. And, you know, like I keep repeating, everybody does it a little bit different, and I do it different just at different times, I guess, basically by the mood I'm in, you know, like which way do I want to go today when I'm doing this. Sometimes, I mean, I really enjoy loading ammunition and doing all these tests, so I'm not trying to find a load for a match or competition, you know, so I'm not in a hurry, and, you know, it's just a hobby and it's for fun for me. So my ultimate goal for each rifle is I want to get down to the absolute smallest group that I can for the most part. And then once I feel that I've achieved that goal, then I typically will move that rifle from my gun safe here in the reloading room to the gun safe that I have in the basement, and it gets tucked away for a while, and then I work on a new one. Or like right now, mainly for YouTube's sake in these videos, I'm actually doing load development for 3 rifles at one time, which that might be doing too much. That might take, sometimes it's better to focus on just one at a time. But, why not? Just do it on 3 rifles and we'll go from there. But what was I saying? Back to doing the seating depth. So another route that a lot of people do is, and I talked about this in one of my other videos, but just going back to it a little bit, I'm calling it the Cortina method. And feel free on any information that I give that's wrong. Maybe I misunderstood it, or maybe I don't have the most up-to-date information. This was coming a little bit from some of his older videos. But, I believe he said that what he'll do is he finds the lands, he comes off 20 thousandths, which that's almost like a best practices. You can even, and I did it, if you search in AI, load development and starting points off the lands, I think it kind of like recommends 20 thousandths. I guess that's kind of just the magic number. But I think he said, he would start 20 thousandths off the lands, and then he does it in 3 thousandths increments, because he was kind of saying a lot can change, just in that 3 thousandths. So if you do it that way, you might be making a lot of different loads. And I think, what did he say in that video? I don't remember if he made like 16 different loads or something like that, in 3 thousandths increments off the lands. I think it was a lot. It was like 12, 16, something like that. In most cases, I don't do that many. I usually do 10. So that's the other side or the other method that I'll use. So I'll start off either 10 or 20 off the lands, and then I'll do 3 thousandths increments, and I'll do 10 of those. And the last one that I put together, I'm doing 10 3-shot groups or loads. So I'm doing loading up 3 bullets for each one. So I mean, that's another kind of like method. And then when you find, you get all your data from all that and compile it, you find where your rifle likes to shoot with a seating depth. Then, he always says, Cortina always says, don't never chase the lands and all that stuff. But, and he did state as well that you'll want to, as you get like throat wear erosion, the more you shoot, then you might have to come up a little bit. And one part that I forgot in that too, when he was saying that you want to do 3 thousandths increments, he was talking about you want to look and find, where your best, when you find your node, or, like a group in between. So like in between 2 of those loads that look the best, then you want to take the seating depth from that top one and then come 1,000th off that. And that's where you're going to start developing at. And I hope that makes sense. I probably should like get like a whiteboard or something like that and draw all this stuff out, though y'all might hate me for that since my handwriting is so bad and I'm not an artist. So that might be a whole different animal, but hopefully kind of the way I'm explaining it, maybe it'll help. And then, that's just if you watch these and listen to me. Like I said, there's tons of other videos out there and some really well thought out and well put together videos that will go further in depth and explain things. But this is just my take on it, just like I said, trying to get into YouTube and get, some of my videos out there and my opinions and stuff. So then after you take that, then you can continue on with it. When you find the lands and where your rifle's shooting, the best at, you can go back and try, to try to modify things more, like try to adjust that powder charge a little bit more, or then try different powders. So it can be, I don't want to say a never-ending process. There's always, not always, you're going to get to a point where you have tried about everything you can, but there's always like room for improvement, adjustment. So you take the load development as far as you want to take it. Like, how many things do you want to change, and what, you have to decide for yourself, like what is my goal? What am I trying to get to here? Is this a hunting load that I just want to get one MOA, or half MOA, or in between, or where do I want to be? And there's some rifles I have that it seems like no matter what I do, I never see like a 1/4 inch group, and that may be a reflection of the rifle, or it may be a reflection of me, or the combination. So, every shooter is going to have different capabilities, and every rifle is going to have different capabilities. So always keep that in mind. There's some rifles that I have that, or had, that I just never could get groups out of, the groups I wanted. I had for example, and I'm not trying to throw any rifle brand or anything under the bus. Maybe I got a lemon or a bad one, but I bought a Ruger American. It was Gen 1, and I just never, I barely could get under 2-inch groups with it. And it didn't matter what I tried to shoot out of it. I couldn't get that rifle to shoot. So that was one that I traded in. I wasn't a fan of it anyway. The action was really stiff. I had, it didn't run smooth. I had extraction issues. I just had all kind of issues from that rifle. So I wasn't a fan of it anyway. So I got rid of that one. And I have gotten rid of a couple of other ones that I just couldn't really get to shoot well, and just didn't really like them anyway. So a lot of those rifles, I always feel guilty. I don't ever sell them to friends or post them. I just take the loss and do the trade-in program at some of these places, which you're lucky if you get 1/4 of the value going that route, or whatever you paid for it. So if you're not familiar with that route, you can go to Sportsman's or local shops or whatever, or I guess even do pawn shops. But a lot of times they say they go to they'll have a certain site they use that'll put a value of what the rifle's going for used, and then they give you like a percentage of that. So a lot of times, let's say, I think in that one instance, I probably paid, what was it, $400 or $500, something like that, for that rifle. And I think they gave me $130 for it, or it's somewhere around there, 120. So you're not gonna get back a lot of money on that stuff. But I'm not just, I'll let them deal with it and have the guilty conscience, which I know they won't, but of selling it to somebody else, kind of a lemon or dud rifle. But anyway, I know I got off topic, and that's one of my flaws. I'm pretty ADD, and it's easy to get me off topic. I just start going a different direction. But anyway, I don't want this video to drag out really any longer. I'll just kind of wrap it up by saying thanks for watching. Please do all the things, like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. Let me know in the comments, what do you use for load development, opinions and practices and all that stuff. I always love hearing from different people. I don't really like, I've had discussions with people as well who their method that they do is in stone, and it might as well have been part of the 10 commandments from God. Like they have, you can't really discuss anything with them because that's their way, is the only way of doing things. I don't really have fun when those type situations come up, because I don't, whatever you do, because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for the next person. So I like to hear all the different methods, options, and opinions, and then kind of make my own decisions on how I'm going to try to do it. But, you know, there you have it. Again, thanks for watching so much. It means a lot. I am trying to grow the channel. I apologize for the poor video quality on this one. I'm still just recording videos with my phone. I am looking at getting a camera and all that kind of stuff at some point. But for right now, this is what I got, and we're going to run with it. Let me know if you'd like to see me do any particular videos or, you know, cover anything. I'm kind of just winging it right now. I'm trying to just do some videos on reloading and the equipment I have, some load development. I'm trying to get out at the range as much as I can and record range time as well. Sometimes that's difficult for me to do because, one, the range that I go to is about a 45-minute drive one way. And then when I get out there, if it's crowded, a lot of people don't like to be on video. A lot of people, it makes them nervous almost when they see you put a camera up and you're recording, even like audio. They don't want their voice recorded or whatever the case may be. So I try to always be respectful of that. And, you know, if there's one or two people there, I might just ask them if they mind. If there's several people there, then I don't really bother recording anything. So anyway, I'm going to try to put together more stuff like that. And I have a lot of thoughts and ideas of other videos that I want to do. So stick around. I'm going to try to get out, hopefully, some good information at some point and some better quality videos and all that kind of thing. Sorry. Thanks again.